Well, that passage is an interesting account which gives us a lovely insight into Jesus' life amongst his own family and amongst his community. His ministry has begun, his disciples are with him, but he is still part of that family and community and has been invited to this wedding. We don't know if it was the wedding of a relative or a friend, probably a relative, as his mum Mary seems quite involved. And of course, weddings in that culture would have gone on for days and involved many guests. For me, this miracle stands out. It's included in John's Gospel, and we know that John refers to these miracles and things that Jesus does or says as signs. They're not just included because of the miracle themselves, but they are signs of who Jesus is and what Jesus has come to do. The water in the jars, as we read, would have been used for ritual washing. This can be seen to represent the whole system of the Jewish law, the old covenant between God and his people, about keeping ritually clean, keeping every aspect of the law in order to remain in good relationship with God. But Jesus replaces this water with wine. Jesus replaces the old covenant with a new covenant. We remember that when we take the wine in communion. What Jesus did when he shed his blood on the cross, he did for us once and for all. We no longer have to worry about earning our salvation, only receive the gift that he offers us. His new covenant is generous. It's wine, new wine, a new, abundant, ongoing way of life where his grace, his mercy, his forgiveness, his love are always flowing over us, filling us until we overflow. Like that image in Psalm 23, the goodness and mercy that follows us all our days, and our cup filled to overflowing by God. But as well as a sign of all this, this account sets us a wonderful example and some principles that we can follow. Firstly, we see an example in Mary. When she encounters this problem, what does she do? She turns to Jesus. How simple. When in need or trouble, turn to Jesus. But is that always what we do? Or is turning to Jesus a last resort? Well, having turned to Jesus, Mary then shows faith. Because although Jesus hasn't yet agreed to do anything, Mary tells the servants to do whatever Jesus tells them. Secondly, this event reminds us that there is no sacred secular divide. God is interested in all of life. This lack of wine at the wedding is not a life or death matter. It isn't a healing or a raising from the dead. We might think the matter is not important enough to trouble Jesus. It's just a social occasion. But of course it wasn't insignificant. It would have caused huge social embarrassment and shame for the couple and their family if the wine ran out. Now let's be clear. The rabbis may have said without wine there is no joy, but the Bible is clear. Wine may bring joy, but drunkenness is not okay. However, festivals and feasts, celebrations and holidays are very much part of God's plan for his people. Religious festivals were about remembering and marking. There could be solemnness in that, but there was also the gathering together, the eating and drinking and celebrating. I don't know if any of you have seen clips on YouTube of Orthodox Jewish weddings now. There is such joy, the joy of the bridegroom and the bride, their families and the whole community. So much of that joy is the deep spiritual significance of the wedding. And this is a beautiful thing to behold. But the rituals and the hospitality, the eating, drinking and dancing are part of that as well. Well, we don't know what had happened in this case. Was it bad planning, or were the family too poor to provide more wine? We know, though, that God has a particular heart for the poor. And even if it was bad planning, Jesus takes pity and helps out. Are there parts of your life that you think God wouldn't be interested in or think are important enough for him to act? Or do you think there are things that perhaps are your own making and God would not want to help you because of that? Or do you sometimes think that God couldn't be concerned with you? There are other people more deserving. Well, I think this event shows us that God cares for each one of us in every aspect of our life, and he takes pity on us. And more importantly, he really wants to bless us, because we see that Jesus does more than is necessary. Jesus doesn't just provide the wine needed, he provides vintage wine. There are no half measures, no pun intended. There is enough wine, and it is good wine, the best wine. Is that what we expect from God? When we ask God for something, do we expect him to answer at all? Or do we expect that he might just about show up with the goods? Or do we expect that he will do more than we ask? I think John is showing us here that the grace of God, when it comes, does not just bring enough. There is abundance and overflow of grace. God's grace does not run out. God's grace is never exhausted or totally expended. It's not about quantity, though, it's about quality as well. When Jesus comes into your life, when you turn yourself over to Jesus, his grace transforms the water, the ordinary, into wine. And as we read on through John and in the other Gospels, when we see that wherever Jesus went and whatever lives he touched, it was like turning water into wine, bringing healing and wholeness, acceptance and transformation. It can be so easy for us to feel distant from God and allow everyday trials and troubles to get us down and fill our thoughts. And that's why it's so helpful to remember what Mary did. When she was faced with this problem, she went straight to Jesus and handed it over to him. She didn't know what the outcome would be, but she trusted it to Jesus and walked away, leaving him to do what he willed. When we come to God like that with open hands in our need and open hearts, open to what he may do, rather than coming with a list or plan of what we think should happen, then his response may not be exactly what we might expect, but it will be the right response, and usually always better than what our solution would be. But of course, we have to go to him. We have to be honest and admit that we may have made mistakes, or be honest that we're in trouble, even if it's not our fault, that it's too much for us, and we need to hand it over to him, just like Mary did. And that's not easy. This isn't just a message for us as individuals, though, but also to us as a church family. We've been thinking about lots of things for the future, some of which are very different or very big, and which we know we don't have the resources for ourselves. You know, sometimes I think that's a good thing, because if we think we have the resources, we'll just get on and make a plan. But if we don't, and have to go to God open-handed and open-hearted with no idea what he might do, actually his response may be so much more than what we may have come up with ourselves. We would probably have come up with water, but he will come up with wine. I think we're already seeing this in some of the things that we've been praying about. God has more in mind than we could have dreamed of. God has been putting us in touch with people who have wisdom and experience, who we can learn from and partner with. So let's keep pressing in prayer, in our own lives, for our own needs, and together for this community and this church family, that God will turn water into wine, bringing wholeness and healing and fullness and flourishing to this community and beyond, as his kingdom comes on earth as it is in heaven. Well, let's remind ourselves now of God's goodness and mercy, his overflowing love, filling us, filling our lives, filling our cups, as we sing or listen to that lovely old hymn, "The Lord's my shepherd."